We will not stop fighting for more economic and security assistance for Ukraine.
I'm confident the Senate will pass further urgent assistance to Ukraine later this year.
So the Senate majority and minority leaders agree about their desire for more aid for Ukraine. Now, despite their efforts, no Ukraine money made it into this continuing resolution bill. That funds us now for 45 days. Resistance to billions more dollars of Ukraine aid has been growing among some Republicans, primarily in the House. Now, one of the strongest supporters for keeping that aid flowing is former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. She's out there defending it on the campaign trail. Well, I talked with the GOP presidential hopeful about that and much more this weekend. So we are here in Washington against this backdrop of fights over funding, keeping the government going, but also how much the U.S. government, the taxpayer here, is going to continue to spend on issues in Ukraine. It's one of the areas there is some daylight among the GOP candidates on the field of this issue of foreign policy. Here is what GOP Senator Rand Paul says about this. He says, we have no extra money to send to Ukraine. Our deficit this year will exceed $1.5 trillion. Borrowing money from China to send to Ukraine makes no sense. Do you think it makes sense?
You know, it's interesting that they give you that false choice, and this is why I think it's important for Americans to know the hard truth. Congress has only delivered a bill on time 4 times in 40 years. Think about that. That's one of their only jobs, 4 times in 40 years. And then you go and you look, and we're having this shutdown of government, or do we do it, do we not do it? The reality is Republicans and Democrats, all of them, have been spending taxpayer dollars in a ridiculous way. They just take a budget from last year, add more to it, and keep going. So the false narrative of we can either pay for certain things or Ukraine is wrong. What Ukraine is national security. Now, I will put the blame on Joe Biden. Joe Biden and the president is always supposed to show leadership on why things are funded. Joe Biden has done a horrific job of really explaining to the American people and making it transparent of where this money goes. The fact that this is actually going to prevent war. The fact that this is only 3.5% of our national budget. The 3.5% of our national defense budget. The fact that, this goes back to 11 European countries are spending more than us. But what is this going to? It's going to weapons. It's going to replenish our stockpile. It's going to make sure Ukraine has what they need. And it's going to make sure that if they win, this is not a win for Russia or China, but it's preventing war so that it doesn't go into Poland and other NATO countries.
Well, but to be clear, we have a financial house that's out of order here in Washington. None of us at home could run our budgets this way. Governors can't get away with this at the state level. I mean, you can't print extra money or go into further debt on a number of issues. So the fact is, we are spending money, taxpayer dollars, on Ukraine, and we are borrowing enormously from China, from other places that do not have our best interests in heart. So that is part of the calculation, the fact that we are taking on debt to another country in the service of what we can send to Ukraine.
It is. We're $33 trillion in debt. We're having to borrow money just to make our interest payments. China owns some of that debt. But, if you're going to look at that, why don't we look at the fact that why, Republicans put in $7.4 billion of pet projects and earmarks in the budget, and Democrats put in $2.8 billion. Why don't we look at all the things we don't need to spend on? It's the reason why I think we need to go back to a budget that starts at zero, says what do we have to have, and then work our way up. It's also why I think we need to put more money in taxpayers' pockets. I want to eliminate the federal gas and diesel tax. I want to reduce taxes on middle-class Americans and make our tax structure safer. I want to make the small business tax cuts permanent. They only made them temporary. Let's make them permanent. And, I think a lot of people have vilified the Freedom Caucus in this shutdown conversation. But let's be clear what the Freedom Caucus is really trying to do. They're trying to cut spending. Let's go back and have spending caps so that we make sure that we never overspend. Cut up the credit cards. Quit borrowing. 8% of our budget is interest. I will stop the spending. I'll stop the borrowing. We'll eliminate the earmarks. And I will veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels. That's how we'll get our country back on track.
There'd be a lot of work for President Haley to do on that front, watching how this is playing out in D.C. now. Okay, so we'll see how the financial house will shake out. I want to talk about a piece in Politico. It's a very lengthy piece in their magazine saying that you essentially talk around tough topics. They quote one analyst saying she'll adapt to whatever benefits her. It was on the heels of a podcast with a New York Times columnist who said this: for someone who makes a big deal about being straight with voters, Haley's awfully cagey. uses kind of vague language, trying hard to wink at both pro-choice and anti-abortion voters at the same time. You have said it's not fair to talk, and we've talked about this, to voters about the possibility of a federal ban on abortion because you say the numbers simply are not there. But Governor DeSantis, Senator Scott, they know the numbers aren't there either, but they're willing to have the conversation. Here's Senator Scott.
I like Nikki. I wish she was the same kind of candidate as she was as a person, but now she's kind of flipped the tune a little bit. You really just can't trust her. She will not join myself, and Ron DeSantis joined me on the debate stage for a 15-week national limit on saving life. She won't do that.
If you had the numbers, would you commit to that type of federal ban?
Yes, and I've said that many times, Shannon. I mean, the goal is how do we save as many babies as possible and support as many moms as possible. You know, when the stories like Politico or New York Times, when they say that, it's because they think they can't push me in a lane. I believe what I believe, and I say what I say. I've been a realist. In order to pass that bill, you have to have 60 Senate votes. We might have 45 pro-life senators. I refuse to demonize the issue of abortion. I refuse to have people divided on it. What I'm saying is, let's do what we can get done. But it is one of those issues
that in this country people are extremely divided on. I mean, there's no way to have people sit around and sing Kumbaya over the issue of abortion, maybe about the other part of the conversation, funding women, helping them figure things out, but not on the issue itself of whether that procedure should be available and who should pay for it.
Well, I mean, then, Shannon, why do I have so many Republican, Democrat, and independent women coming to my side on this? It's because I've said, yes, I'm unapologetically pro-life, but I'm not going to judge people for being pro-choice. In a situation of a federal law, I think it was right that it went to the hands of the people. I think it's right that states are deciding. But if you're going to talk about a federal law, let's be realistic. That's what I am. I'm a realist. Let's be realistic. Don't go and divide people on something that doesn't look possible. Anything that we can agree on. That's why I said if we can ban late-term abortions, if we can encourage adoptions, if we can make sure women don't go to jail or get the death penalty for an abortion, let's be realistic on it. And whatever we can find consensus on, that saves more babies and that supports more moms. That's my goal at the end of the day, but I'm not going to hate over it. I'm going to make sure that we're loving about it and that we humanize the situation.
All right, something where there's been a little bit less love has been between you and Vivek Ramaswamy on the debate stage. You all have clashed repeatedly. That happened again this week, leading to one of the most talked about moments in the debate. It was this.
Honestly, every time I hear you, I feel a little bit dumber for what you say.
Okay, but before he was running against you, you did write a blurb for his book, Woke Inc., in which you said he urges us to lift up all Americans rather than to pit ourselves against one another. His combination of honesty, intellect, and foresight are exactly what we need to overcome our challenges in the years ahead. So were you right about him then, or are you right about him now?
Well, I think I always praise people when they deserve to be praised, and I hit people when they deserve to be hit. The book that he wrote, I supported it. I helped him. He asked me for help with it. I was happy to do it. I'll help anybody that needs help, and it was a good book. But I think the things he's saying now as he's running for president is very different than that. The idea that he is saying, well, because 150 million Americans are on TikTok, even though it's dangerous, I'm going to get on it anyway, is not leadership.
Let me stop you.
Let me stop you there really quick.
Yeah, let me stop you there very quickly because I want to play something that he just said about this issue of TikTok and get you to respond.
I do think it's a little hypocritical for the other candidates who were virtue signaling and criticizing me on stage, even as their own kids, adult children, are on TikTok today. So I think we have to recognize the reality of where young voters are.
All right, he didn't name names, but is he referring to your kids?
My son's not on TikTok. My daughter was on TikTok up until about 2020, and I think she posted something at a bachelorette party. But look, she's 25 years old. My job is to educate. My job is not to go and make my kids that are adults. My job is to educate and say why. But him jumping on there and making people think it's okay, be very careful about how people talk about TikTok. This is the Chinese Communist Party. who is doing espionage. They don't just put things on your phone in an app. They get access to your contacts. They get access to your financial data. They get access to your emails, and they spread different dangerous things. Right now, they're spreading things about how to use steroids and things like that for working out. These are dangerous apps. And what I'm going to do is keep telling every American, don't let your kids be on it. Educate them, tell them why it's dangerous. And I'm going to keep saying that. I think TikTok is dangerous, and just because 150 million people are on it doesn't mean you do it because it's politically popular. I think that's wrong.
All right. We have so much more to discuss, so please come back, but we got to leave it there for today. Ambassador, Governor Haley, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much. Go to NikkiHaley.com and join us.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.